This might sound like the craziest One Piece theory ever, but what if Imu is actually Luffy from the future? What if the final enemy of the story is the future version of the boy who wanted nothing but freedom? It feels impossible at first, but when you follow the clues Oda has been planting, everything begins to connect in terrifying ways. Because this theory is not about power, it's about tragedy, destiny, and the darkest possible conclusion to Joy Boy's legacy. And the more you think about it, the more the pieces fall into place like a nightmare that was always meant to happen. Let's start with the simple contradiction at the heart of One Piece. Luffy is the sun god, and Imu is the king of shadows. Luffy fights for total freedom, while Imu rules through absolute control. They are perfect opposites, which in storytelling is exactly why they might be the same person. Because the greatest enemy you can ever face is yourself. Imagine the end of the final war. Luffy wins. He destroys the celestial dragons, crushes Imu, tears down the world government, and gives every nation full, unrestricted freedom. It sounds like the perfect ending, but that's exactly why it can't last. Because absolute freedom leads to absolute chaos. Without order, pirates rise stronger and more violent than ever. Wars erupt between nations. Slavery returns under new masters. And the world Luffy dreamed of becomes a nightmare he cannot fix. And so the unthinkable happens. Luffy realizes freedom alone is not enough. He realizes people can't be trusted with the world he fought for. And in a moment that breaks him, he decides to rebuild the world by force. He decides to create order out of the chaos he accidentally unleashed. And that decision is the birth of Imu. Freedom becomes order. Joy becomes fear. The sun god becomes the shadow god. And Luffy, the enemy of tyranny, becomes the architect of a new one. The clues, they are everywhere. Start with the frozen giant straw hat hidden beneath Pangaea Castle. Why would the most powerful being in the world keep the symbol of freedom locked away like a grave? Why would Imu, the destroyer of dreams, protect the hat of the boy destined to defeat him? Unless the hat belonged to him. Unless it's not a trophy, but a reminder. And then there's the name, Imu. Say it out loud. I'm you. Oda loves wordplay. This is not an accident. Imu's eyes are another crack in the mask. Those haunting ring-shaped pupils appear nowhere else in the story, except in Luffy's Gear 5, where his eyes widen into a godlike, almost supernatural expression. Imu's eyes look like a hollow, dying version of that same divine form, the sun god drained of all warmth, the light of Nika, without joy. And now we get to the most terrifying possibility of all. Time travel exists in One Piece. Toki used it. The world government feared it. The Void Century began with it. And immortality exists too, thanks to the Ope Ope no Mi. Law can perform the perennial youth operation, granting someone eternal life at the cost of his own. Now imagine the final war. Luffy is dying. Maybe pierced, maybe burned, maybe crushed by an enemy beyond anything he has ever faced. The crew is desperate. Someone, maybe Chopper, maybe a future Ope Ope user, sacrifices everything to save Luffy. He becomes immortal. He lives forever. But immortality is the curse of gods, not the blessing of men. Over 800 years, Luffy watches everyone he loves die. His crew turns into memories. The world he freed collapses again and again. He sees that human beings don't know what to do with freedom. And slowly, painfully, he changes. He becomes harder, colder, and more detached. The boy who once laughed at everything becomes the god who feels nothing. He creates the world government not as a prison, but as a cage to protect humanity from itself. He builds the system he once hated because it's the only tool strong enough to stop the world from falling apart. He becomes Imu, the eternal guardian of order, watching the world he once loved break over and over. And this explains everything about Imu. Why he fears the D, why he knows the Straw Hat Pirates are the greatest threat, why he understands Nika, because he was Nika, why he wants to erase the future, because he already lived it. Imu is not a god, he is a warning, a living monument to what happens when the brightest light becomes the deepest shadow. And that is why, in every scene, Imu behaves not like a tyrant, but like someone who knows where every path leads. He already fought Kaido. He already fought Blackbeard. He already destroyed the ancient weapons. He already witnessed the end of the world. Imu doesn't want to stop Luffy. He wants to stop his younger self from making the same mistake. He wants to stop the cycle of freedom leading to chaos. He wants to prevent the world from drowning again in the fire of liberation. And so the final battle of One Piece becomes the greatest tragedy ever written. Luffy versus Luffy. The boy who dreams versus the man who regrets. The sun rising versus the sun fading. The will of D reborn against the will of D broken. And that might be the darkest secret Oda has been hiding for 25 years.